Hi guys, and welcome back to the beginner tutorial. This is part 2, and you guys made an awesome job doing your homework from the first episode. Yeah, I'm really I was expecting you guys to do exactly what you were supposed to do. And thing is, the results are really cool. This is such a great beginning of a painting that you pretty much all of you did. So this is really awesome. I've got a huge amount of submissions from you guys on Twitter and Instagram, and I keep getting them. But yeah, you're all very well done. Well, 99% of you. Some rare cases used some selection I can see. Some of you obviously sometimes switch to a smaller brush, which is something I really don't recommend doing, and I would recommend to give this exercise another try without changing the brush size, because that's the number one thing that you should be doing to get this exercise to work. Otherwise you're just redrawing the 3D render without actually learning much. But yeah, for today's episode, I want you guys to pretty much finish the painting. Right now we're gonna use what you already painted, like this stage in my case, and we're gonna keep working on it, but we're gonna make the brush 50% smaller. So instead of using the 200 pixel size of the brush, now we're using 100 pixel size. And pretty much with the detail of the reference, we don't have much of the complex geometry or anything in here. This size of the brush is actually everything we're ever gonna need, with a very rare exception, maybe. So yeah, it was really important that we do the first step from the first episode separately, so all of you guys would feel the challenge and the benefit of working with a really big brush at the first stage. You don't necessarily have to segregate steps like this perfectly. Sometimes you can switch the size of the brush to a smaller one to define some shape better, but you have to keep your thinking process in the state that you've been in while working on your first homework assignment. So right now you will see, as we'll do the second part with a smaller brush, you will see how beneficial it is to have your painting already started in this state that we've already done. Moving on from this, adding details onto this painting that we have now is so much easier than to actually start defining all the objects with a very smaller brush and really sharp details right away. You will feel how liberating it is and how much more strategic this approach is. So let's actually start. I'll just paint over a little bit and then I'll tell you some tips if we have any, but pretty much this is the same exercise, but now we use a bit of a smaller brush. I still look at the reference because I know I need to do quite some fixes, because the shape of the sphere of mine is really wrong and everything. So right now I keep detailing and thinking about how to bring this picture closer to the reference ideal version. So yeah, I'll be fixing everything that needs to be fixed, the shapes, the composition, the color, the lighting, pretty much doing the same thing, but just with more control over my brush and having a really good and convenient base built with a bigger one. Okay, so I guess this will be it. I don't think I have anything to add to this painting with this size of the brush anymore, and it looks pretty much like a finalized painting of a certain level of detail. And here's the progress from the last time. As you can see, I did a couple of fixes on the shapes, especially on the sphere. It became an actual sphere, and the frontal side of the box, the darker side, I made it even darker to make it closer to the reference. this. Now I can see that the perspective is wrong, like I have much closer to isometry kind of look, and I need to like distort the shape of the box a bit like this to make it closer to the reference. So yeah, not much of a difference in the process from the first episode. Pretty much I worked the same way, except for one little trick, which is kind of contradictory to the whole point of the exercise, but I'm gonna mention it anyway. Sometimes, even using this size of the brush, like for instance when I was changing the color of this plane, making it darker, I choose the darker color and I was doing this kind of shape movement, like in constant circles. This is something I started doing about last month. Sometimes I feel like doing this. What this means, this movement, it means that I work with this smaller size of the brush, but I think with it as with the bigger size of the brush. Basically, I could switch to a 200 pixel size brush again to cover a bigger shape, you know, without having like obvious just smaller strokes all over it. But instead of that, I use a smaller brush with a round kind of movement. The important part is that you don't use the benefit of actual smaller brush, you just make these big shapes that you would do with a bigger brush, but with a higher precision because you control the shape of this brush much better when you actually draw this shape with a smaller brush. What I'm trying to say is I could paint this picture in the first stage the same way using the smaller brush, but just doing this kind of movement all the time. And in some areas I would have the benefit of, you know, instead of having a round kind of shape, sometimes I would be able to, you know, adapt it a little bit, but I would still think on a bigger scale of spots. But that's like, you shouldn't really think about it. This is one thing that was kind of different from the first episode process, because in here I actually sometimes felt the need to have the size of the brush even bigger, so I kind of like simulated it with this movement. So yeah, at this point right now as I finished it, I feel like there won't be the third episode of working on this painting. Like, we're pretty much done with it. So right now what I'm gonna do, and what you are also very much welcome to do in the end, right now I'm gonna make the brush size like, I don't know, 30 pixels, and I'll just do those little few things that I really felt the need to use a much smaller brush on. Right here, obviously these corners are incredibly small, so we need a smaller brush to define this. So yeah, there we go. A very satisfying process of adding those smaller little tweaks to the details that I wasn't able to do with a bigger brush. But pretty much nothing more than that. Everything else in the painting is done before I did these sharper details. And this is the main takeaway from this whole tutorial. The actual sharp details are the simple, easy part that you do in the end. It's not important. You will figure it out very easily. What's really important is to figure out everything else before you do the smaller details. So yeah, consider this finalizing of the painting with the 30 pixel size of the brush. By the way, don't do anything smaller than 30 pixels in the very final stage, because there's really no point in it, as I can tell you right now. So consider this finalizing stage with a smaller brush as like a third tutorial. I just don't want to spend another week on releasing another episode of, hey guys, this time we make the brush size even smaller. Obviously, this is the logical continuation to the process. The main idea of here is that you step by step make the brush size smaller only when you're 100% sure that you defined everything you had to with the bigger size, and now you can move on with a smaller one. Like, you have nothing left to do with a bigger one, only then you move to the smaller one. And for today's homework, make sure that you first do everything you can with a 100 pixel size brush, and only then move to the 30 pixel size. So yeah, go ahead and try this and send me me the same way the final results of your work, the actual final paintings of this render. And then in the third episode that will come out in about a week, we'll do a different application of this whole process that I think all of you guys will really enjoy, and I will enjoy watching what you will do, but I'm keeping it a secret for now, obviously. So yeah, concentrate your effort on finalizing this picture, and generally, of course, practice this over and over again, because if you find it really hard to define details this way, this is your main thing. You should practice it over and over again. Try to find different tricks on how to make the shapes work, even when they're much smaller than your brush. When you figure it out, and when you really like practice it a lot, that it's gonna be just a thing that you do automatically, like you just need to visualize some shape, you just automatically, you know how to do it, and you have this awesome proper brushwork. That's when you know that you do everything right, and from that point you can move on thinking about more details, learning anatomy and lighting and everything. Only when you know how to put spots on the canvas, only from that point you can move on, in my approach anyway. So yeah, I guess this is it. Good luck with your homework, and I thank you for watching. If you did, I guess you did. If you're here, leave a like and subscribe, tell a friend, think big, do whatever you want, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Ooh, can't wait to tell you guys what the third assignment is. It's gonna be so cool.